Welcome to the City of Caldwell podcast. Today we have Debbie Geyer, who's the city clerk for the City of Caldwell. Debbie, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, just how you grew up, how you became the city clerk, and just who you are?
Sure. Actually, my folks moved to Caldwell when I was very young, 1965. So I've had a long history of living in Caldwell during my formative years. Loved the community. Caldwell was a very active community in our downtown, so there was plenty to do as a child. It was a wholesome community, great for raising family. Lots of friends in the school system, and so we all kind of hung out together and did various things here. Always have loved Caldwell, had a special place in my heart for it. When my husband and I married, we moved from the area directly to start a new life with military chaplaincy was our ultimate goal. So that involved college and all the preparation to make that happen. So we left for 25 years and spent that time in ministry and then military chaplaincy with the Army. Came back 2001 to find Caldwell. Various changes had been made during that 25-year period. It was great to see the progress of the community. Came back to actually help with care with my parents at that point. So knowing my personality of wanting to be involved in the community in one fashion or another, I was delighted to see an opening as soon as we had made the decision to move back here within the Planning and Zoning Department for the City of Caldwell. So I applied and was hired. That's been almost 22 years ago now that I started as an employee of the City of Caldwell. And it has been a great journey. I was very fortunate that I have had wonderful bosses during that time. Planning and Zoning Director, when I was in that department, knew of my background and history of the community itself, and came to me one day and asked me, if you were going to have a project to restore a historical facility or structure in Caldwell, what would it be? So I said, let me think about it and I'll get back to you. During that time frame, I was doing some archiving of some records and cleanup of different closets and cubbies of where records had been stored. And I found a print of a picture that had been drafted and created for another grant for our downtown back in the 1990s. And the author of that grant was the Planning and Zoning Director at the time. But she had partnered with a local architect by the name of Tom Inslee. Inslee and Associates were very notorious for helping with public projects in the city. So he took that on because he was part of the Preservation Commission here in Caldwell and had a deep love for the community as a whole, but especially the train depot. So he created this beautiful design of what could be the train depot plaza and the surrounding area. That's the picture I found. So when I saw that, I thought, wow, that is instrumental. We can save that depot possibly from deterioration with a grant. So I went down to visit what the train depot had looked like at that time. Of course, it had been years since I'd been in it. And I was dismayed to find the condition of this building. The train depot had various problems, but one of them was a leaking roof. And they had even placed this queen up in the rafters to catch the drips at the time. It was that close to deterioration fully of the building structure itself. And then in that interim period of when the city had actually purchased the building, it was taken over at that time by the Parks and Recreation. And they were using it for karate classes and gymnastic classes. And so it definitely had taken on the look of a classroom, but it needed a lot of TLC. The room that we're sitting in right now, which is the freight room, was used basically for storage by the street department of all the Christmas decor. Oh. And so it was up to the ceiling with various items that maybe didn't have a home anywhere else And so they would take it to the depot and it became storage. So I went back to my boss, the director of planning and zoning at the time. His name was Steve Hassan. And I said, Steve, I think I've located what we should do, and it's the train depot. It needs help. We'll lose the building if we don't do something soon. So we began the research for grant funding, and we were in basically the right place at the right time with the state through ITD enhancements grants, and enhancement grants were basically centered in on historical structures that possibly could be rehabilitated to its original state. And we qualified for that grant, and it was exciting. So we received that grant, and then we went, of course, piggybacked on that with some other grants. With Community Development Block Grant was one of them. There was a Historical Heritage Trust grant that we were received, and then local donations. So from that, we were able to start the project of rehabilitating this building back to its original state, and then add a plaza for community functions down here, and various events into the depot itself, partially as an event center and then as a museum to show the element of transportation and the importance of transportation to the community. I should mention that in the 1980s, Union Pacific was wanting to destroy as many of the unused train depots, because at that time there was not Amtrak available. Some of the depots were still being used as freight, Caldwell Depot being one of them. But then at some point, even the freight situation kind of ended. In the 1990s, they were very adamant in looking for those places that weren't being used. Nampa was still being used at that time as for Amtrak in the 1990s, but this depot was just sitting. So Union Pacific approached the city at that time and saying, we're going to destroy the buildings unless there's community involvement of purchase. So one of the citizens in the community really took that to heart. His name was Carpenter, Mr. Carpenter, Bob Carpenter. And he had formulated a kind of a downtown community group, and they bought this depot for $1 at the time.
Nice.
They used it for years for economic development purposes and whatnot, and then eventually it was acquired by the city to take it over for the sake of basically maintenance, repairs, and whatnot, and then use. And that's where I came in 2001, seeing that it was used by the Parks Department. So now the process starts. Getting the grants was one thing, but then implementing all of the changes, which we had a great architect and whatnot at the time. So we were able to use those funds, restore it, even including the ticket counter, which had been taken out by Union Pacific years ago. The only thing that was left by Union Pacific when they vacated the building was a large two-sided bench, which is still in the building. And there was some bills of lading and old documents up in the dormers of the building. That was it. So what is a train depot without a ticket counter? So we were able to acquire additional grant funding to have that reconstructed, to make the element look like a train depot, not just an event center. We wanted it to appear, and it's surprising how many children, especially nowadays, don't even know what the function of a train depot is. So it's an educational tool as well. So we were able to locate some original architectural drawings that showed that the train depot here in Caldwell did have a functional train ticket counter, and that was through another short line, Oregon short line train depot located in Ogden, Utah. And with that, there was a carpenter shop very close, so they went in and actually replicated the whole ticket counter, delivered it piece by piece up here, put it together, and that was the last element basically with the completion of the grant. So with that, then there was a need for community buy-in, and that led us to the Friends of the Depot. We were able to formulate a community volunteer group that came in and actually put together this beautiful museum that we have in this building here. with all kinds of different pieces of information. Everything from the urban line, which was kind of a commuter line, for the outlying area here that went from Caldwell into Boise, because we were the first depot. Because of elevation, they had to start basically in Oregon with Huntington and whatnot and move forward. And so this urban line was kind of a great in-between piece, but it also was just a local line for residents to use, maybe to get produce to the train depot. In fact, they wouldn't say we're coming to Caldwell. They would say, hey, we're just going in to the train and the depot, because a lot of the farmers needed some kind of way to get all of their produce transported. And so the urban line was great for that, but it was also great for the College of Idaho, because the College of Idaho students were not all from Caldwell. They were from all the outlying areas, and so they would ride the urban line into campus, and that was the reason that for years, and it still is there, it was called the Hat. It was basically the kind of the urban line stop for the College of Idaho students, and it's been restored over the years and is still standing there in front of the College of Idaho. It's a great historical piece. But those elements, as well as the military element of using the train depot for years for various soldiers to be sent off for their military service. Caldwell really was a military town at one point, and you can find out more about that by visiting our train depot here, because it shows that we actually had barracks here in the city of Caldwell and a training program for pilots in conjunction with Gowan Field and the College of Idaho. So those are kind of fun elements that you find out by visiting the site here.
Right.
We partnered also with a group that is the Model Railroad Club of Caldwell, and they built a fantastic display here that is a workable display. The children love it. It shows what the main street of Caldwell looked like in the outlying areas there at the turn of the century. And it has various elements of buildings that you still recognize that are still standing, as well as some that aren't, which used to be the Saratoga Hotel, one of them.
Right, yeah.
And then there's various displays here that show what Caldwell was at that turn of the century. Maybe the hotel is one element, but downtown, general stores and livery stables and barber shops, all of those sort of elements are here in this beautiful museum that has been constructed for the purpose of education of our community, what Caldwell was all about. The Oregon Trail started way back then with, again, putting Caldwell on the map with transportation. So we invite the public to visit the Train Depot Museum the first Saturday of every month from noon to 4. We're open for open house, so you can see not only the open event center portion of the depot, but also the museum and the elements here of history. Children love it as well as adults. We have had so many people come in and say, hey, I've lived in this community for 40 years and I've never been in this building. Or we've had those that even have had visitors, relatives, whoever come and say, I'm from out of state or out of country. This is wonderful, and ask all kinds of questions. So we invite you not only to participate in that way, but if you are interested in becoming a Friends of the Depot member, we are always taking applications for that as well. So as a city clerk now, because after I left the planning and zoning department after about 4 years, I moved into the clerk position, and actually I've been with the city for almost 22 years now. The train depot is still my love, and so we coordinate events here for people to rent the train depot, so they can contact the city clerk's office for that, and we will help you schedule that if it's available and give you information. There is a fee for rental of it, but we can explain that if you are interested. And then as well as coordinate the Friends of the Depot and their functions with special events here, as well as public meetings that we have on a quarterly basis. So they can always contact my office as a city clerk and find out more. And I'll give you a phone number in case anybody would like to follow up on that. Okay? So 208-455-4656 is the city clerk's office, and we would be more than glad to help you with any of your inquiries or needs. in regards to the train depot.
Cool. Now, let's talk about city clerk for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us, what is the function of a city clerk, and what are some of the challenges that you have, day in and day out as the city clerk?
Sure. My interest as being the city clerk is to serve this community. That's what a city clerk does. She's the record keeper for the community. And so there's a lot of archiving, record keeping that goes on, and history of where Caldwell's come from to where they are now. Of course, I mentioned that I lived in this community for many years prior to leaving and then coming back again. So I have seen definitely kind of a flip of the coin as to what Caldwell was and what it is now. Caldwell, at the time that I was here in the 60s and 70s, was basically very instrumental with commerce. We had a going downtown at that time. Everything from J.C. Penney's was down here to Idaho Falks department store to coast, you name it. We had it downtown. More so than some of the surrounding communities. So again, Caldwell was the place to come to. So a lot of that history, fortunately, has been preserved with various documents. Of course, the city clerk is very tied to city council and their decisions. And so a lot of that history is documented within ordinances and resolutions and policies and procedures. So our office kind of keeps a thumb on all of that, along with the local library as well. They have a lot of archived pictures and newspapers and whatnot that give history of the community. So the city clerk, though, helps to kind of guide the community as to, I need a bit of information, where do I go for that? Or I have a concern about the community, where do I go in order to make that known or resolve an issue? We're there, like I said, as a record keeper and a service agent to the community and to city council liaison in that way. My position falls under as an appointed position, so I'm at the pleasure of the mayor and the city council. And of course, we want to do all we can for the community to help with different concerns, various ideas of improvements, various events with community events and whatnot. So we're there to serve. That's a big portion of why the city clerk is kind of in the hub position to the community. But beyond that, in my position over the years, it's kind of evolved in a lot of things, and then recently kind of restructured even with a change of administration within the last few years. But when the train depot opened down here, the city clerk I was basically appointed as the project manager for the rehabilitation of this building, but then also to get it off its feet with event center. And then we actually put into the grants that for the first 5 years that there would be various events on site here in order to get the community buy-in to the plaza and the various aspects of the building. And so we had everything from live concerts down here on a monthly basis called Friday Night Live. We had great response. And you have to figure this was before Destination Caldwell ever came into place with Indian Creek Plaza. So this was the first active plaza to our downtown. Now it is so exciting to see a return of the busy commerce in our downtown as it was when I remember it as a child. And of course, Destination Caldwell has been instrumental with that, with all the events that they host over there. So oftentimes we'll do various things that kind of supplement various events that they have over there, like Indian Creek Days. Indian Creek Festival will hold various events over here as well to kind of give people a purview of the whole downtown. Winter Wonderland, we've held events here in the past with Winter Wonderland Open House. Interesting enough, the first year that we had Winter Wonderland, with all the lights and display, we as a Friends of Depot wanted to support that. And so we said, well, let's open up the train depot. We'll all be in attire that resembled the turn of the century. And it was just great. We were all in costume. We thought, okay, well, we would like to have something to give away to all the people that come in. And so we had cookies. Well, we thought that first year event, maybe we would have 300 people. So we had 300 cookies. Well, we ended up having over 1,000 that year.
Yeah.
And of course, it's not turned back since. Now the event is so well attended and is valley-wide known for its beautiful lights, and then of course, just the activities they have in conjunction with that. So we are very thankful for the return of just a busy downtown. So the Friends of the Depot is a community volunteer group that helps with the education of the train depot itself, and then actually has educational events down here to spur buy-in to the facility. So they have done various things in conjunction with Destination Caldwell. And of course, they have wonderful events at Destination Caldwell with Indian Creek Plaza. So sometimes we're kind of a overflow for those events in the downtown. But we do everything from educational lectures here. We've done downtown tours. We've done various displays in the depot with model railroad clubs or other museums in the area come and talking here as to what they have to offer as well. But the Friends of the Depot feel like there's still an element that they need to be involved with as far as education of what the depot stood for at the time that it was constructed in 1906. This building was constructed at that time. And so there is still an element of education that we want to be involved with. Now, saying that, there's some future projects that are pretty exciting with that, along with just the museum that we have here, and then the elements of history there. There is, in the depot grassy area, there is a monument that talks about the Steunenbergs and how influential they were in Caldwell, and the assassination of Governor Steunenberg, which happened right here in Caldwell on Dearborn and 16th. So that monument is also a bit of history when you come down to visit. But something new that we're working on right now is a project that is being worked on by staff through my office, as well as in participation with the Caldwell Historical Preservation Group and Friends of the Depot, is the return of a historical fountain that was actually in Caldwell at the old City Hall. Now, it's a beautiful structure that we have pictures of, but in that City Hall structure itself, there was multiple uses going on at City Hall. There was a fire department that was in that building. There was the police department that was in that building. There was a library that was in the building, and the mayor's office with the city clerk was in the City Hall building at the time. So as you can see, it had a lot of activity going. And there was a fountain that was placed at the front of City Hall that was a 3-tier fountain. So the top of the fountain, one tier was for dogs so that they could obtain water. And then there was a element there for horses, and then for the people, citizens could also obtain water from that same fountain. It was beautiful. It was very unique. And the fountain was actually obtained from it was a rock quarry foundation that was back in Maine. And there was only so many of those awarded to municipalities. And fortunately, City of Caldwell was one of them.
Wow.
And so it was there at City Hall on 7th Street for years. It was moved to Memorial Park for a period of time, and then it returned to the Pioneer Plaza, which was on Kimball and Blaine. With new construction going on by a private party at that location, we wanted it to return to 7th Avenue. We thought that that was the most appropriate place for it. So it will eventually return here in the plaza of 7th Avenue at the train depot. So be looking for that. We're still in the process of that. The fountain is being rehabilitated to its beautiful, restored, original look. And we're excited that that is an ongoing project that will, again, share the history of Caldwell and its community with the citizens.
Nice. So it came full circle.
It did. It came full circle, and we're excited to be a part of that.
Nice. Well, Debbie, thank you so much for just telling us who you are, just all the changes in the city and the history behind the the Friends of the Depot and the depot itself. So thank you so much for that. And if you guys haven't seen it yet, come on down, come to an open house. If you're interested in volunteering, please go ahead and, what was the number again?
208
Yep.
455 4656.
I think it's on the city website also.
It is, and you will find the city clerk has a webpage there, as well as the Friends of the Depot have a webpage, and you can find out more information.
Cool. Thanks, Debbie. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.